I'm it's funny, I'm waiting to say hi everybody because my screen shows a delay in people getting admitted. But hi everybody. Welcome to tonight's mindfulness and
Hi.
resilience class. I'm one of your hosts, Frank, and I'm here with Vivian. Hi Vivian.
Hi. Hi, Frank.
Vivian is going to do a bit of a talk and lead a practice today.
Thank you, Frank. And yes, welcome everyone. Since it is a new month and we're committed to um, sharing a new topic, as we were developing it, we were thinking about what we would do. And then Frank, who likes to invent words, said, we can call this genuosity. We in this month we're going to be covering all sorts of topics, including vulnerability, authenticity, equanimity, a lot of itties. But when originally when the class was on Thursdays, we would have had Thursday off. And so when we stood back from it and realized we're now teaching on Tuesdays and we wanted to, have this class, what would be the topic that we could add that would kind of give us foundations? And I thought, well, what about who's the I that's presenting with vulnerability or authenticity or equanimity? And so I, following Frank's footsteps, decided to say, well, this I am, this amness is a good topic to start off with. So genuosity as a word was, we brought it together between genuineness and authenticity. And so, yeah, as this series continues, who knows, this word might get some traction and we start referring to genuine, authentic people as genuous. So as I was researching, I came upon this limerick that's attributed to Alan Watts, and it kind of speaks to who is this I. And he says, there was a young man who said, though it seems that I know, what I would like to see is the I that knows me when I know that I know that I know. And I loved it because it really reflected who, who is doing the experiencing when we're doing all these practices. And you might see furriness pop up from the bottom, and that is little Shumi popping her head every once in a while.
Is Shumi going to practice with us?
We'll see. It's her choice, right? We always talk about choice. We'll see. So, a major philosophical expression that has carried into the modern age that we live in was Rene Descartes' view of I think, therefore I am. And I don't know how many of you kind of have reflected on this saying. I'm sure most of us have come across this saying of I think, therefore I am. But really what it means is if I were to look out into the world or even into myself and my own existence and note whatever is happening, there's thinking happening. So even if I were to doubt everything's reality, everything as being in my reality, the fact that there's this thinking thing happening and that there is someone doing it or some thing doing it, at the very least, on that level, there's something that's existing, which is this thinking thing. And we know from our practice that there's definitely a witness experiencing all of this. So when we turn our attention toward different things, we have direct experience into that witness that can observe, I'm thinking, I'm hungry, I need to get up or I need to move, right? So when we think about who is this I, what elements make up a person? We all oftentimes think of ourselves as this being. I have a name, I have goals, I have preferences, and I go through life kind of exerting on the things that I like, or trying to draw those more in, and trying to minimize all the things I don't like. But really, when we think of what makes up a person, this I, it is shaped by inherited traits. And we're not just talking about the physical traits that you have, but also your brain synapse connections. Your brain, and neurologically, that's a big part of that is inherited. Now, with as we're learning through neuroplasticity, that can be modified. But research shows that, for example, generations that have experienced famine, those markers actually show up in future generations. And the study of that is called epigenetics. And so sometimes even traumas like genocides are also the effects of that turn on and turn off certain genes in future generations. We're also made up of our family and primary caregivers' orientation towards us, or lack of orientation towards us. And if we think about what our first experience of what it means to be in relationship with other humans, or what work means, or what our belief systems are, the values that we embrace initially, or were asked to embrace, these are all things that we don't have a lot of say in, but influence us deeply as we grow. The other piece is, as we begin to grow, there's the socialization aspect. And now we're getting influenced by the larger culture, and we start to negotiate what we grew up with and see if that fits of what we're seeing out in the world, and start evaluating it for ourselves, finding that part that we're comfortable with, noticing what we're going to keep, what we want to set aside. And so we start influencing one another and our peers through our thoughts and our behaviors, our attitude, our temperament, everything you can possibly think of. So you can imagine, for example, a person who isn't particularly they don't come into a lot of contact with a lot of diversity in thought and experience, what that would do to their own makeup and how they perceive the world and what's happening and their values and all of that. The other piece that we should consider is, because of all this influence at every stage of our development, that we do need other humans to help construct our self-image. We've seen it. I don't know if you guys have ever seen any of the documentaries of feral children that end up getting lost out in the woods for a couple of years, and then they're found, and how they take their experience from the animals that they came into contact with. And so it's broken down, their humanness gets broken down to what those that they come into contact with. And that's because we're social beings, and we build our self-image and our sense of self in relation to others. And so I really like this Zulu phrase of a person is a person through other persons. There is no individual that isn't defined by the clusters and levels and ripples of influence that come into their lives. And so that's what we're going to be exploring with our practice period. I wanted to add, even our dreams, we develop hopes and dreams, and all of the ideas and goals that we have, they are always in relation to the structures that we have around us. So our perception, it is always being negotiated, and our reactions are always being modified based on who agrees with us and lauds us and gives us accolades, and those that critique us, and those that kind of are neutral towards us. So thinking back to who is the I, we can think about the I is made up of non-I elements. This sentence structure comes from my root meditation teacher, in that everything is a composition. So if you look at a car, it's made up of different elements, whether it be plastic, metal, rubber, glass, right? There's nothing out in the world that isn't a composition of a bunch of different things. So even this me, this I, is made up of non-I elements. I can share the story that when I'd finished law school, my first job out of law school, I had this very nice office. And, I would go and see all these other attorneys that were further along in their career, and they all had their degrees up on the wall with their names and, beautifully framed. So I didn't even have the money for it, but I went and got them professionally framed. And I had all these degrees up. And this is before I was meditating or anything like that. And I had them on my wall. And I was having to see them every day. And there was my name on it. But really, I started thinking about all the people that contributed. And this was before I was a meditator. I was like, the people that cooked the meals in the cafeteria, and the people that cleaned the rooms, and my professors and my classmates who I had study groups with. And I thought about all the efforting that came from people well outside. And yet on this degree, only my name was showing. And as soon as it kind of hit me very deeply, I took them all down. I didn't feel comfortable, and now they've been sitting for like 20 years in a closet because it doesn't feel quite right that my name is on the degree. But it really was a concerted effort from so many different people that I knew and people that I didn't know, that influenced that. So this I, that's me, is made up of non-I elements. The accomplishments that I have are made up of not just my effort. And if we kind of expand it further, we can think about things like nutrition, the meals, right? Education, the experiences that you get exposed to, the cultures that you get exposed to, and the one that you're raised in, whether it involves multiple languages or one language, or ethnicity or religion, ableism. Our relation to what we're able to do varies. Our starting point varies, and how it changes over time also varies. So our physical and mental capacities that are constantly in flux and changing, our age, our gender, all of these things play into who we are and how it fits into this particular society. So what would it be like, for example, to grow up in a society that was predominantly, in the United States, it's predominantly Christian. What would it be like to be in a country that was not, and be of the minority, if you were a Christian or another faith? What would it be like? There are matriarchal societies. What would it be like to grow up in one of those societies, and how would that shift our whole view of our life and our world? And so I want to also distinguish between perception and perspective. Perception being that process of experiencing and being aware of something through the senses, through our, sight, seeing, taste, touch, hearing. And perspective, so coming back to perception being that thing that is always referential to past. If you think about it, perception is always looking to the mind as a reference database to make sense of what's going on. What am I experiencing right now? This thing smells sweet. It is yellow. It has a certain oblong shape. I know it to be a banana, right? It doesn't happen that slowly. It's off really, really fast. But, you start making these associations, and it's referring to the past. When you come across a fruit that looks foreign, your mind starts to attempt to look at all the different possibilities of what it can match it to. And if it can't, then it starts deciphering to see how it can make sense of it. Perspective, on the other hand, is the way or approach towards that experience. It's the point of view that we take and about a certain situation. It's definitely influenced by how we've interpreted the situation or something similar in the past. But as we grow and learn from experience and build on our wisdom, our perspective tends to change also and evolves. And when that perspective shifts, so does the future experience of it. And that's why a lot of times, if you look at any wisdom tradition, they always say, focus on what's right in front of you. Because if you can make what's right in front of you beautiful, then as you move through your life, you're looking back, your mind's going to look back on this circumstance and reinterpret it, the experience in that point of time, the future point of time, in terms of what you've built, the foundations you've built up to that point. And the person that I was, the example that I was thinking about as I was thinking about perspective shifts, and it's the reformed person who was formerly racist, and for whatever reason, again, all these things playing on their personality and their mind, they were raised to have racist ideas. And yet, as they move through life and come to experience and interaction and learn, and they begin to shift that perspective and look back and note the arc of the growth that they experienced from where they began. And so with that, I want to just turn to you, Frank, because I know I've put a lot out there, but I wanted to see if you had any thoughts on any of these things.
So, one of the things I think about the brain is it's like a pattern recognition. I was going to call it a device, but right. So what it's doing is based on the patterns we've encountered in our lives along the way, those become the templates for trying to figure out, is that a banana? Is that a carrot? Is that some other vegetable or fruit? Right? So that part of what I hear you talking about is, can we develop, how would I say it? So we're all the result of our conditioning, right? And so that perspective is also based on the patterns we've encountered, our anticipation of future patterns, and that these practices can help. I'm trying to think of what the right word would be. I want to say freshen it up, right? So that it's not just dependent on pattern recognition. It's possible to encounter something fresh or new, because some of what we're doing in the practice is trying to have clear perception, being able to encounter a thing as it is, not as we think it is, not as we feel it is, not as we remember something like it is, but encountering it with freshness. The other thought I had that I was appreciating what you were saying is, there's this notion, like America is big on individualism, and often sort of, I think, as a country, we kid ourselves about not being interdependent. You sort of see that when rich people are talking about how they made it through their own sweat. Like it's contextless and it's just them as an individual, rather than they were born into particular circumstances that make some things possible, some things easier than if they were born into other circumstances. But that interdependence is really, really important, because not only we're not born and we don't live in a vacuum, and it would be, I think, much more respectful and really enlivening to acknowledge like like in your degree example, right? All the people, all the beings and places that contributed to it, it feels like there's a lot more room for gratitude there than if it's I just did it. I just did it on my own. So those are a few thoughts inspired by what you've been talking about.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. And this funny thing, I just got another certificate, and I was at my own graduation just over the weekend, and I had that same kind of wash over me, that same feeling of like, wow, so many things had to come into play for this even to happen, and just to add on to what you were sharing is that, yeah, what I think these practices do is they create a pattern interruption. So we have our standard way of interpreting everything, but when we bring in that witness, that awareness, we'll call it the awareness witness for lack of a better way to describe it, it creates a pattern interruption of like, wait a second, like instead of letting the cassette play, and I know I'm dating myself, but whatever, letting the cassette play, you're holding the pause button for a minute, digesting it. What did I just hear? What did I just smell? Or what did I just see happen? And then releasing it again to see how it plays on, right? So the more we do that in this kind of closed circuit practice period, where we kind of can control the elements and we're moving our attention and our awareness to different things, the more that skill gets to be accessed in our day-to-day lives, just as we're going about doing things. So thank you for that. And I'm thinking that we might have a lively discussion about this afterwards. I don't know. I hope so. But let's practice for a bit. So I invite you to stretch up and settle into your seat. Do whatever you need to do to get comfortable. This practice you can do sitting, laying down, in movement. I just encourage you, if you are going to be practicing while in movement, like walking, to really slow down the pace of that movement, whatever you're doing. Let it not be your natural pace, because when we do that, the mind tends to go into autopilot. But you can do this in any posture. Your eyes can be open or closed, or anything in between. If your eyes are going to be open, and just again, to minimize the distraction, a possibility is to maintain a very soft gaze a few feet in front of you. You only have to listen to my voice. I'll be guiding us through kind of a grounding exercise, and then we'll move into the practice of reflection. We're going to kind of do a regression of our identity over the course of time. And just notice what's happening. I'm going to ask you to look to different things of your identity, and just notice what's happening and what was being experienced then and how you're experiencing it now, and seeing that interplay. Sometimes it's going to be the same, and sometimes it's going to conjure up a different set of emotions. Through all of this, I hope you'll maintain a really gentle, friendly, and curious effort just to be with whatever is happening as it's arising. Remembering from the perspective of mindfulness, there's pleasant and unpleasant, like everything has a valence that we experience, but there is no wrong experience that we should be having. There's just ones that we prefer over others. And if you happen to not want to do this practice or can't do this practice, you're more than welcome to take this time to shift to a practice that feels more nourishing tonight, or stop altogether. And you're always going to have this recording, so you're more than welcome to revisit it. And with that, just invite you to begin by taking a couple of deep breaths. Let them be comfortable but deep. And if it's available to you, sighing on that exhale. And it might seem a little dramatic to be sighing that way, but it actually helps stimulate the vagus nerve that communicates to the mind. We can relax, we can be at ease. Breathing in, sighing out. And there will be moments of silence as we move through this practice. That's just an opportunity for you to explore the prompt I just gave and see if it suits the situation, how you're relating to it, what does the mind do with it, to build that intimate relationship internally. And so we'll start with taking stock of our mind. What's the state of mind that I'm experiencing right now? Is it sharp and alert? Is it foggy or groggy? Or bouncing from one thing to the next? Is it here, or is it wandering and daydreaming or planning? You can ask yourself this question a couple of times. What's the state of my mind? Offering your attention to your emotions, and sometimes it helps to move our awareness down into our heart area, which is where we sometimes associate with feelings and emotions. Beginning to notice if there are any particular feelings here in this moment. Just note them. If they're not that many, you can begin to explore them one by one, where in the body you're experiencing them. So sometimes, for example, when we're happy, we experience a tension around our lips because maybe we're smiling. Maybe there's a fluttering or a softness in the belly or the fluttering in the chest, a lightness. Or sadness, maybe we feel it in our shoulders where they feel a bit concave. Maybe when we feel angry, we feel tension in different areas of the body. When we feel content, there might be areas in the body that feel loose and relaxed. So checking in to see, what emotions am I feeling? How do I know I'm feeling them? Where are they showing up in my body? And now, moving the attention to the whole body, beginning to notice and taking stock of the physical body and how it's doing tonight. Is it feeling relaxed? Is it feeling tension? Are there certain areas that are blank, void of any sort of sensations of softness or hardness? Does it feel cool or hot? So you can take note of temperature in different areas in the body, the sensations on the surface of the body, those on the inside. What is the state of my body right now? Remembering to stay gentle, curious, and friendly for whatever you find. And sometimes the mind wants to go into an explanation as to the why something is happening. Just setting that aside and coming back into the body and seeing if it has one more thing to communicate, one more sensation. Let's open up to the way the body communicates through physical sensation so we get a full picture of how it's doing. And so with the practice of who am I, we're going to start with noticing how this body is doing. Just ask yourself gently this question of who am I? And without rejecting or over-identifying with any word that comes up, begin to notice, how does that question get answered when you say, who am I? Or if it's easier, you can ask the question in the third person as who is, and fill in the blank with your name. And just let those identities pop up popcorn style. So it might be your line of work, your role in the family, personal qualities that you have. It might be an emotion, a perception, an ideology, a faith. Who am I? if something unexpected comes, and staying open. Returning to the question, who am I? Before the mind can begin to formulate a story around the why. Now let's go back 10 years ago. Ten years younger, without these last 10 years of experience, without the experience of a global pandemic. So much has happened in this last decade. Just think back to who you were then. Who was this person? Who were they? Remembering your thoughts and perceptions. Maybe some of the identifiers of today didn't even exist then. Maybe they did. Maybe there were some dominant emotions back then. What sort of qualities did you have back then? And now going back 10 more years. So we're referring to 20 years ago. Who was I? How did I feel? What were my most obvious personality qualities or quirks? What were my greatest goals and fears? And now go into your young adulthood and begin to identify what that person was like. What were their hopes and fears? What sort of personality qualities did you have then? What perceptions did you have about yourself, about others? As young adults, we were just beginning to explore the world on our own, negotiating our values. Was it challenging or was it easy? And what were your identifiers then? Maybe you had particular skills. I was a student. I was a trombone player. These are just some ideas. I was an athlete. Now going back to your childhood, you can pick any age. Those grade school years, and reflecting on your identity as a child. You're probably a student. That was one identity. You were someone's offspring. So you might be a son or a daughter. And all of these have emotional components. And valences to them of being pleasant identities or unpleasant or rather neutral, neither one. Sometimes when we were young, we have to rely on other people's accounts of us, so you can pull those in too. I was shy. I was active. What sort of a child was I? What ideas did I have about being in the world? And as you reflect on these 4 stages that we kind of move through, reflect on if there were any that were recurring. Were there identities that remained that you can run the thread through all the way back to childhood? Did some come and go? Did some end and give way to other identities? And notice what that feels like. What kind of emotions arise when you think about, oh, that has stuck through all the way through. Or that did end and now is back. Or that just ended. And if other qualities, as you reflect, come through, just take notice. Who am I? We all are a culmination of these experiences, these identities that came or went or stayed. They guide our focus, our viewpoint, our preferences. How much do they influence our day-to-day perception? Remembering to breathe if you notice anything creating any tension or that seems a little difficult or unpleasant. And reminding yourself, let me hold this with kindness. If there is anything that you find that's less than admirable, I can hold this with kindness. May I hold this with kindness? It's the mistakes that we make or the lack of information, the limited information that sometimes dictates how we act in the world. So allowing for some grace for anything that doesn't seem to align with our values today. Now, as we close this practice, we can recognize that we practice as individuals and we get personal benefit for sure, but the fruits of this practice actually ripple out to all those who we come to contact with, in that we're a little kinder, a little more generous in our speech and our time. So a little kinder. And so we practice for ourselves and so that we can be out in this world, this challenging world. Now taking an opportunity to take another deep breath in and sighing it out. And doing that a couple of more times at your own pace, in the same way that we started. If your eyes are closed, allowing the light to peer into your eyes gently and opening them. We'll transition now into sitting up. And I don't know why this doggie wants presence, but she wants to be part of our discussion.
Hi, Shumi.
So noticing how you're feeling, what that brought up for you. I forgot to say this up front, but that topic is a big topic, and I wouldn't even claim that we scratched the surface about, like, literally it's the philosophical questions that have been asked for as long as humans have been alive. Yeah. Like, so who are we? What are we doing here? What motivates me?